April the 2nd, 2018. Ethiopia's new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, is ushered into power on the coattails of national protests. 1 year on, the bold agenda of Africa's youngest leader has attracted praise from around the world.
Well, Ethiopia's Prime Minister has only been in the job since April, but he's taken the country through a number of reforms.
The young and old, and all of them are really, really excited about what the future holds for their country.
Taken groups off the terror list, released political prisoners and journalists.
Behind the headlines, however, a much more complex, tense transition is taking place.
We are dealing with a country that is in its own twilight zone. The transition is in many ways very fragile.
This is Sadale Lema, the editor-in-chief of Addis Standard, a prominent newspaper that led coverage of the series of protests that have taken place in the country.
It's a very delicate, sensitive, highly emotional kind of contestation awaiting this country.
Tamrak Georgis is managing editor of the Addis Fortune newspaper, a media mainstay that reported throughout the 2018 revolution and transition.
The politics and the policy possibilities have complicated. And the picture is far more complicated than it was a year ago.
Journalist and blogger Eskinder Nega. After years in prison, he was released on a presidential pardon. He set up shop again and rekindled his career.
There is still doubt whether the country could make it to democracy, whether it will fall back to dictatorship, or whether it actually get worse in going to war.
And Jawa Mohammed, the influential and controversial head of the Oromia media network, he returned from exile to a hero's welcome. 4 journalists, all with a part to play in this new phase of their country's history. This is not the first time they're speaking with the Listening Post. In 2018, we interviewed them on their media expectations of the new Prime Minister. We've come back to them now to get their thoughts on key media aspects of Abiy Ahmed's Ethiopia.
If he's ready to be held accountable, he has to start talking to the media. They are not hostile to the media, but they have not been accessible. They have not been as open as they promised to be. They set up this new Prime Minister press office with a hope and promise that they'll hold this weekly or bi-weekly press conferences. They had just once, I think, and they did not do it after that.
He has also not met the media so far to face our questions. So that makes me worry of whether he is genuine or not. If you wanted to have a request for an interview, you don't get that opportunity. We see more and more government officials using the social media, which makes them directly accessible to people. However, I'm very disappointed that the distribution of this information is highly choreographed. So it's very frustrating that we're limited into the kind of information government authorities want us to hear.
Social media is, that's where the game is. That's where it's going to be even in the future. It will be the medium through which they will engage in political discourse, and it will be the medium through which we'll mobilize. I can't imagine the world without social media at this point. It's great to live in a world in which, millions of people are able to talk to each other.
The kind of fast change that we've seen over the last 3 years without the social media would have been impossible. The value of social media has been realized to the extent that you can find every color, shade of views in the social media. But the message that is churned out is substance of high polarization, which is part and parcel of the political process that is taking place. There are mobs on every side. They have demands, political interest. They are trying to assert that.
I think moving forward, particularly media like the one I run and myself, we are going to move from one ethnic line advocacy more into inclusiveness, because we have a responsibility to do that. It's quite difficult to be as aggressive, as vocal as I used to be. Today, we are not dealing with full-blown authoritarian government. Today, we are dealing with kind of leadership that has aligned itself with protesters, that has aligned itself with the population. So, of course, I'm an activist that has moved from open and aggressive criticism of the government to a more critical support of the government. So my role is an activist, but with a lot more responsibility.
Democracy has not been realized in this country. We're still fighting for democracy, so we need the activism. When this transition is over, and if there's no democracy, we will not be able to practice journalism. We'll be back to square one. So until we have democracy, it's our obligation to fight, to be active in promoting democracy.
Some would say we have to remain activists until democracy dawned on us. And I don't have any problem with somebody's stand in saying, I will have to continue like that. But it becomes problematic when stories are being corrupted by online activism, including journalists who are doubling as activists. And it's very unfortunate that we are in that circumstance. And I do hope that we would come to our senses.
When you are a professional journalist, there are things that you need to observe. And more than anything else, you have to observe your own code of conduct, which requires you to be factual, accurate, fair, balanced, objective, reasonable. All these are things that you need to observe that are completely alien to the world of activism.
Ethiopia's political transition is balanced on the edge of hope and fear. Hope for a political transformation and fear of slipping back into repression. For the first time in 13 years, there are no journalists in the country's jails. Hundreds of websites have been unblocked, and licenses have been granted to 23 new media publications. But there's still a long way to go. Ethiopian media have years of control and censorship to break free from, and outlets there are still working on forming professional bonds to strengthen their industry.
Media houses need to come together, discuss what should be, how can we help the transition without compromising our journalistic principles. If we do that, we can help. But expecting the media to not take side, not to advance certain interests is just not realistic.
Once you have a democratic framework, if you have a democratic system, if you're a democratic country, by the way, then a natural outcome of that system would be press law, good laws that ensure freedom of expression, that ensures that journalists are protected.
I do hope we would have a press council, most importantly, where we come together and hammer out on our own code of conduct. We will have to restrain ourselves into professionalism. Other than picking a topic and pitting one community with another. That is not the job for journalists.
The media has continued to be an instrument of power. The instrumentalization of the media continues. Where so many things are on the balance, what do people want from the media? They want the media to be a force of verification, a platform for rational discourse.